The 19th century Prime Minister crossword clue is a difficult one to solve. It requires knowledge of history and politics from the era. The prime ministers of this era were responsible for making important decisions that shaped the future of their countries. In the UK, Lord Liverpool was one of the most influential prime ministers of the 19th century. He oversaw multiple wars and was known for handling complex diplomatic relations. He also introduced a series of reforms to the country. Count Cavour of Italy and Prime Minister Otto von Bismarck of Germany were two of the most powerful statesmen of their time. Both had a strong grasp of the international political environment and were able to successfully implement their vision in their respective countries. Tsar Alexander II of Russia implemented a number of reforms during his reign that helped to modernize his troubled country. He was also one of the few European statesmen to abolish serfdom and introduce universal education. William Ewart Gladstone was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1868 to 1894. He was known for his commitment to social reform and was described as the People's William. He was also responsible for the expansion of the British Empire. In the United States, President Abraham Lincoln was one of the most important figures of the 19th century. He was considered a great leader and was largely responsible for the successful conclusion of the American Civil War and the subsequent abolishment of slavery. Émile Loubet was Prime Minister of France from 1899 to 1902. He was a moderate reformer who increased civil liberties and sought to reduce tensions between France and other European countries. He is also remembered for his policy of allowing the citizens to vote for a directly elected president. In Austria, Prime Minister Hugo von Kohler was in power from 1896 to 1907. He was known for his successful political and economic reforms, which helped to modernize the country. He also initiated significant changes to the country's foreign policy. The 19th century also saw the emergence of Kemal Atatürk, the founder of modern-day Turkey. He was a strong statesman who pushed for the removal of the Ottoman Empire and the establishment of a constitutional republic. He is often considered as one of the greatest leaders of the century. In Japan, the reign of Emperor Meiji witnessed the country's transition to a modern industrial state. Meiji was a great leader who reduced the power of the nobility and initiated a number of reforms that improved the economy and the living standards of the people. In Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald was the first Prime Minister of the Dominion. He was a great technocrat who was responsible for the construction of the Intercolonial Railway, which linked the eastern and western parts of the country. Józef Pilsudski was a prominent Polish leader in the early 20th century. He pushed for the establishment of an independent state and was also influential in securing the nation's western border and its autonomy. Albert von Habersack was Prime Minister of Austria-Hungary from 1908 to 1911. His tenure was marked by the introduction of some reforms and attempts to find a common ground between the demands of both nations. In India, Lord Curzon was the Viceroy and the Governor-General from 1899 to 1905. He streamlined the bureaucracy and introduced a number of reforms to the country. He is also remembered for promoting education in the nation. Prince Karl of Romania was in charge of the nation from 1866 to 1881. He was one of the most important figures in the development of the country and implemented a number of reforms related to the military, economy and education. Prime Minister Count Leo von Caprivi of Germany was in charge of the country from 1891 to 1894. He made great efforts to improve relations with the countries of Europe and was also responsible for introducing reforms related to social security and infrastructure. In Norway, Prime Minister Johannes Steen was in charge from 1896 to 1898. He is remembered for his successful implementation of economic reforms and his willingness to recognize the independence of Norway from Sweden. Prime Minister Charles Tupper of Canada was in office for a single term from 1896 to 1897. He was an effective leader who was known for his dedication to public service and his efforts to expand the nation's railway network. William Littleton was the Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1806 to 1807. He is remembered for introducing the Act of Union between Great Britain and Ireland, which helped to strengthen the links between the two countries. Prime Minister Jan Neruda of Czechoslovakia was in charge from 1924 to 1926. He helped to improve the nation's economy and strengthen its democracy. He is also remembered for successfully implementing a number of reforms aimed at reducing poverty. Spanish Prime Minister Antonio Cánovas del Castillo served from 1868 to 1872. He was a strong believer in the idea of a parliamentary monarchy and was responsible for introducing a series of economic and administrative reforms in the country. Prime Minister Juan José Lavalle of Argentina was in power from 1827 to 1828. He was an important figure in the nation's struggle for independence and is also remembered for introducing important reforms related to the economy and education. Prime Minister Camillo Benso of Italy was in office from 1861 to 1864. He was responsible for unifying the country and introducing a series of reforms which helped to bring peace and stability. Carlos Melo of Portugal was Prime Minister from 1851 to 1852. He was a reformer who pushed for the introduction of a new constitution which gave more power to the people. Alexandru Marghiloman of Romania served as Prime Minister from 1898 to 1899. He was an important figure in the nation's transition from a feudal society to a more democratic one.